Coming up on New Day at Arirang. South Korea is set to see another record high in daily COVID-19 infections Friday. Authorities are expected to announce new social distancing measures later in the day. The four leading candidates for South Korea's upcoming presidential election held their first televised debate on Thursday. They clashed over how to best deal with South Korea's overheated housing market and national security, but agreed on the need to reform the national pension system. And U.S. President Joe Biden has announced that American forces killed the leader of Islamic State during a Wednesday night raid in northwest Syria.
Hello and welcome to this Friday edition of New Day at Arirang. I'm Mark Brim. It's 8 a.m. in Seoul, South Korea on February 4th.
And I'm Kim Mo-gan. Over the next hour, we'll take a look at the big news stories of the day and get expert insights on the issues facing Korea and the world.
Our top story this morning is the COVID-19 situation. As you might expect, South Korea is set to see yet another all-time high number of infections on this Friday as the country continues to witness new records day after day now.
And given the current virus situation, it seems likely that the current social distancing measures will be extended. For more on this, we have our reporter Choi Min-jung here in the studio with us. Good morning, Min-jung.
Good morning.
So like always, what are we expecting for today?
Well, Mo-gan, we're expecting yet another record high number of infections today. From midnight to 9 p.m. Thursday, South Korea saw more than 22,000 cases. It's the very first time the 20,000 mark has been surpassed during this time period. Compared to the same time the previous day, the figure soared by more than 4,400 cases, while it has nearly doubled compared to a week ago. Authorities are bracing for a further uptick in cases as more people are expected to get tested with the long holiday now over. Meanwhile, the government will be announcing further details on the new social distancing scheme in the coming hours, as current measures are due to end this week. Given the virus situation right now, the measures already in place seem likely to be extended. Current rules limit social gatherings to 6 people and restricts business hours to 9 p.m. A government official said that it is a little burdensome to be making changes to the current measures as the country has just introduced a new system for diagnosing and treating COVID-19. A health expert also said that the rules in place right now should be extended for a while as it's best to ease restrictions after the spread of Omicron reaches its peak. But there were also voices of opposition. Some business owners demanded the easing of restrictions as the medical system is now under control with less than 20% of the hospital beds occupied.
Right, and Min-jung, yesterday was the first day of this new one-stop system where patients can be diagnosed and treated for COVID-19 at local healthcare centres within their neighbourhood. Do we have any idea about how the first day went?
Well, one of the clinics that provides the one-stop system said the first day went pretty well. A clinic pointed out the effectiveness of having the rapid antigen test, saying it only takes 5 to 30 minutes for the results to come out, whereas PCR test takes 4 hours. People visiting the clinic said that the easy and rapid testing is also one of the perks of the new medical system. However, there was also some confusion on the first day of implementation. Initially, the government had planned to announce more than 340 local clinics and hospitals that were providing the service, but this fell short on the first day with only around 200 places available, which is around 60% of what was originally planned. And not all designated clinics and hospitals provide everything from testing, prescribing medicine, and looking after patients recovering from home. So people need to visit the Health Insurance Review and Assessment Service homepage to check which clinics provide which service.
So with the ongoing, situation, the number of people who are receiving at-home treatments are also reaching a breaking point. So how are authorities dealing with this?
Right, Mo-gan, the number of people recovering from home is reaching its limit. As of Thursday, 97,000 COVID-19 patients are recovering at home. The government says that the maximum capacity for at-home treatment is currently 109,000, meaning that it has nearly reached 90%. And by next week, authorities are expecting the number to hit 110,000. To keep up, officials have decided to reduce the number of health checks to twice a day for those at high risk and once a day for those at low risk. Currently, monitoring is done 2 to 3 times a day. And they're also considering getting rid of daily health inspections for asymptomatic patients or those with mild symptoms and instead have them check their own health condition and report to medical experts only when necessary.
Right, and everyone's been so focused on testing to see how many people are positive, have COVID-19, but it appears that some rather serious issues have emerged.
Right. Recent data from testing centers showed that not everyone who tested positive in the antigen test received positive results in PCR tests. Data from 4 regions which carried out the new testing system earlier than the rest of the country showed that only 76% of those with positive results from rapid antigen tests were confirmed to have COVID-19 after taking the PCR test. This means nearly 1 in 4 people tested positive for the antigen test but negative for PCR. Authorities have said that they are aware of the lack of accuracy, but the rapid tests are necessary to keep up with surging infections. People are advised to take the antigen test once more after a couple of days if symptoms don't fade even after receiving a negative result.
All right, Min-jung, thank you for the report again. Hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, as always. Now, the opening ceremony for the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics takes place Friday evening local time, with the Games taking place under some, if not the most strict COVID-19 measures the world has ever seen.
Now, under a closed-loop system, 60,000 athletes, journalists, and Olympic staff are completely cut off from locals and tested regularly. Media and staff have to stay in approved hotels within the loop, the organizers' alternative name for the bubble. Wire fences seal off Olympic venues and the media center from the rest of the Chinese capital. The only way inside is via approved shuttle buses or taxis. Millions of households in South Korea gathered around the TV on Thursday evening to see the 4 leading candidates in South Korea's upcoming presidential election verbally duke it out during their first televised debate. They clashed over how to best deal with South Korea's overheated housing market, national security, and other state affairs. However, one topic they largely saw eye to eye on was the need to reform the overburdened national pension system. Our political correspondent Lee Kyung-un reports.
On the stage for Thursday's televised presidential debate were Lee Jae-myung of the ruling Democratic Party, Yoon Suk-yeol of the main opposition People Power Party, Shim Sang-jung of the Justice Party, and An Chol-soo of the People's Party. The first topic of the 2-hour debate was the country's housing market. In the first heated moment, Yoon Suk-yeol slammed Lee Jae-myung over a controversial land development project in Seongnam during his time as mayor of the city, which left massive profits in the hands of a small private company.
배당받을 수 있는 최상한선이 캡을 씌우지 않고 이렇게 설계를 했다는 것 자체가 이게 문제 있는 거 아닙니까?
He countered by saying that none of the money made its way to him, and part of the development profits were returned to public.
저 이익을 뺏었습니다. 공공환수를 5,800억까지 했고요.
However, Yoon refused to let him off the hook, pounding away at the point. But Lee hit back, turning accusations of his own back at the former prosecutor general.
후보님은 이거 한번 생각해 보셨습니까? 저축은행 대출 비리는 왜 봐줬을까?
제 질문에 대해서 자꾸 이렇게 다른 걸 얘기를 하신 거 보니까 여기에 대해서 답을 못 하시네요.
Lee and Yoon, the 2 leading candidates, also clashed over the second topic, national security. Lee denounced Yoon's recent pledge to deploy additional units of the U.S.-led anti-missile system to South Korea, citing the potential economic damage resulting from China's opposition. However, Yoon stood his ground, saying they're necessary to deter North Korea. The Justice Party's candidate Shim Sang-jung shifted gears to the Me Too movement, a major agenda for the Progressive Party. And she extracted an apology from Yoon about his wife's controversial remarks, siding with a sexual assault assailant.
그러시다면은 이 제 녹취록 공개로 2차 가해 등 이렇게 여러 고통을 받고 있는 피해자 김지은 씨한테 이 자리를 빌어서 정확하게 사과하실 용의가 있으십니까?
제가
The People's Party's candidate An Cheol-soo made repeated calls for reforming the national pension system. He warned it's running out of funds, urging all four of them to make a pledge.
국민연금 개혁은 누가 대통령이 돼도 하겠다 이렇게 우리 네 명이서 공동 선언하는 건 어떠십니까?
Lee Jae-myung said it was a good idea. Yoon Sung-yeol said he will also agree to such a pledge. 이경은 아리랑 뉴스.
제가 또 말씀드리면요.
The South Korean government will hold its first task force meeting in the coming hours to discuss response measures against Japan's push to list the country's Sado mines as UNESCO World Heritage. The task force is made up of 7 related ministries, including the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as well as historians. They plan to discuss how to organize a suitable response to Tokyo's move. At the mines in question, at least 1,000 Koreans were forced to labor during World War II when Korea was under Japan's colonial rule. Japan has officially recommended the mines for inclusion on the 2023 World Heritage List.
A UN panel has approved a year-long sanctions waiver for a South Korean civic group's COVID-19 aid to North Korea, perhaps highlighting the deemed importance of the issue. It's the UN's first sanctions waiver of 2022. Kim Da-mi with the details.
A UN Security Council Committee on North Korea sanctions has given the green light to a sanctions exemption for a South Korean civic group to send 20 thermal imaging cameras to the regime. It's the first sanctions waiver for the North this year. The UN panel announced on its website on Thursday it issued the approval to the Inter-Korean Economic Cooperation Research Center on January 26th. The president of the organization told Arirang News on Thursday that the cameras will be used to check people's temperatures as part of virus prevention efforts. It'll have follow-up consultations with Pyongyang on the details like the time and method of shipment.
With train operations resumed across the North Korea-China border, the cameras will be sent after emergency supplies are shipped. We also need approval from Seoul's Unification Ministry.
With the latest year-long approval, the Chinese-made goods will be supplied to the North's Pyeongan-bukdo province. Under UN Security Council resolutions, thermal imaging cameras are usually prohibited from being brought into the regime. The UN panel had already given the organization approval in July 2020, but the group reapplied for the exemption after the goods were unable to be shipped due to the pandemic-related border shutdown. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
US President Joe Biden says the leader of the shadowy Islamic State group has been killed in a US-led counter-terrorism raid in Syria. It's the biggest such mission conducted in Syria by the United States since 2019. Kim Hyo-sun with the details.
U.S. President Joe Biden says American special forces have killed the leader of the violent Islamic State group in what Biden called an incredibly challenging mission in northern Syria. He said the operation sends a strong message to terrorists around the world.
Last night's operation took a major terrorist leader off the battlefield, and it sent a strong message to terrorists around the world. We will come after you and find you. Once again, today, we continue our unceasing effort to keep the American people safe and to strengthen the security of our allies and partners around the world.
Biden added that Abu Ibrahim al-Hashimi al-Quraishi chose to blow himself up in a cowardly act, sacrificing the lives of his family as he did so. Biden administration officials said the explosion resulted in multiple civilian casualties, with Syrian first responders saying at least 13 people were killed, including 4 women and 6 children. The Pentagon said there were no U.S. casualties. It added that it will conduct a thorough after-action review of the operation. The U.S. raid follows a massive ISIS attack in January on a Syrian prison holding some 3,000 of the group's fighters. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
Now it's time for On Point, where we speak to experts to delve deeper into the biggest news stories in the spotlight right now. It's a 2-day work week for most of us here in Korea. That's because we only came back to work on Thursday after the 5-day-long Lunar New Year holiday. The holiday, known as Solal here in Korea, is traditionally a time where families get together. Sometimes we overindulge a touch in big meals, eat lots of snacks, or while perhaps knocking back a few alcoholic drinks along the way. Now, this causes a lot of people stress as they can, and I know this myself, feel their clothes getting that little bit tighter.
For most of us, losing weight is hard, but making sure it stays off is even harder, especially during the holidays. For more on how to stay healthier over the holidays, we are joined by David Kwak, a doctor at Suncheonhyang University Hospital. Good morning, Dr. Kwak.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Well, firstly, I would like to ask, what would you suggest to someone like me who's disappointed that they let their diet slip over the holidays?
Well, we're all partially guilty in that feeling, and through the past 5 days, there's not going to be anybody who hasn't had a little bit of too much to eat and slacked off a little. But what I would suggest is that there's no point in pounding ourselves really for what has been done. And just those 5 days of overeating or binge eating possibly is really not going to affect our health that drastically, unless you're a person of a serious underlying disease who should have watched very strictly of even the daily diets. Just only a couple of days or a few days of binge eating or overeating is really not going to affect us that greatly in really maintaining our daily health. So let's not pound ourselves with the guilt feeling and move on, but plan to live a better life in the coming days.
Okay, great advice there. And I wanted to touch on that point you made a little earlier, further down the line. But a lot of people here, maybe you could say especially so in Korea, worry that their biorhythm, their body metabolism gets all scrambled up over the holidays. Because if someone generally doesn't eat that much, maybe they're busy all day at work and they can only grab a snack here and a coffee there during the day, but all of a sudden they're eating a bunch of food over the holidays. Can eating a lot over a short period when you don't normally do so have either short-term or long-term negative health effects?
Well, not necessarily. So as I said, if it's for somebody with a very heavy underlying diseases, such as that for very severe diabetes and so on, a couple of meals or a few meals in consecutive form is really not going to affect your daily health, or even for that matter, is going to increase your weight in the coming days. Just a couple of meals is really, it sort of evens out eventually on the average of, let's say, 7 to a couple of weeks, because our bodily metabolism really takes into account what we face, not just in the coming hours or days, but what we have to face really in the weeks or months ahead. So when there's an overloading of energy, it starts to pile up in our, let's say, fat composition of the body, but it doesn't necessarily do so in a very acute or drastic way. So if we have, let's say, slipped out and ate too much for, let's say, 5 straight days, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to automatically start piling up fats in our body that much. It'll eventually metabolize all those accumulations to even out in the coming days as well.
Well, that's some good news to hear. Well, doctor, people tend to, beat themselves up after eating a lot over the holidays. So can you recommend, what are the best ways to kind of reverse the psychological impact of holiday weight gain?
Well, the best way to cope with it is really just going back to daily routine. So routineness of the days is the most important part of reversing back to the normal days. I would suggest maybe adding a slight exercise in the routine schedule as well, but not too much of it either, because anything you try to do, let's say, too much more than usual will actually have a setback because you'll become too tired of it, or it can actually make you feel rather more depressed afterwards. So I think going back to routine schedule, such as waking up early and doing a little exercise, then going on to your daily life, and also trying to go back to the normal diet schedule, as in having 3 regular meals, not too many snacks after dinner time, but slight exercise afterwards or slight walking maybe would be a very good idea to make yourself going back to the normal days. I can't say that I kept myself quite healthy during the holidays. I'm trying my best to come back to the normal days myself. I watched a few too many night movies during the holidays, but coming back to the normal days, I'm trying to wake up early, do a little, very light exercise, and then go on to the daily activities as well.
Okay, well, I'm glad you're finally getting on the right track after the holidays. I must say it's kind of worse in Western countries because Christmas seems to be spread out over a week and a half, and people really gorge themselves. It's a little less severe here in Korea, I think. But there are a lot of people who say, even some studies that say it's a bit of a myth, really, that people are putting on all this weight over these long holidays. And could you also say that as long as you take care of yourself reasonably enough anyway, if it's only 1 day here or 2 days here or even a few days over the course of a year where you take care of yourself, is it really even that much of a problem at all?
Well, I completely agree. And I would like to possibly try to debunk that myth here. It's the fact that, as I said before, our bodily metabolism really does not happen over just a span of a couple of hours. It really really takes into consideration what we face in months of a time. So any accumulation of overeating calories, it's not going to suddenly start piling up just because we had a couple of days or even more than a couple of days of over binge eating. So if we have the time to actually go back to routine schedule and stretch out the exercise habits and very healthy daily dietary habits, it's really going to even out and we'll happily live healthy and after. But as you mentioned, it might be a little different from the Western countries where they have much longer periods of holidays. If you spend, let's say, a month of time binge eating and suddenly try to come back to normal life, it is going to take a little toll, especially in the pileup of fats in the body. But as for us, only having gone through a couple of days or even 5 days of period, but then coming back to the normal days, that lasts for, let's say, a couple months afterwards, it's going to definitely even out. So if you can really encourage ourselves to really go back to routine schedule with light exercise every day for daily activities, we're going to stay healthy.
Well, Dr. Kwak, thank you so much for your advice and the great tips. Hope you have a great weekend.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. The OECD says inflation among its member states hit a 30-year high in the last month of 2021. The organization says annual inflation among its 30 members soared by 6.6% in December. This is up from 5.9% recorded in November, and it's the highest level since July 1991. The OECD explained that soaring energy and food prices are driving high inflation. Shares of Meta, Facebook's parent company, plunged over 26% on Thursday, and this wiped out over 200 billion US dollars off the company's market capitalization. After closing at $323 on Wednesday, shares tumbled to as low as $236. It's the single biggest single daily drop in any company's valuation in US stock market history. And this comes as the company reported its first ever decline in Facebook users globally last quarter. A grim outlook for the first quarter sales as well also triggered a sell-off. Food delivery is bigger than ever here in South Korea, but so is the delivery fee taken by the apps themselves. It's causing some restaurant owners and customers alike to reconsider using these apps, with consumers piling the pressure on the authorities. The South Korean government will launch an investigation to ensure everything is above board when it comes to pricing. Ji-young with more.
Yoo Duk-hyun is one of the many restaurant owners who have decided to no longer provide delivery services through smartphone apps because the commission fees are getting more and more expensive. He plans to deliver the food himself to places nearby or encourage customers to visit the store in person for pickups.
We offer additional perks or complimentary menu items for those customers who visit the store for takeout.
It's not just restaurants, but also customers who have noticed a rise in delivery fees. One of the emerging trends among young people is to order with people who live nearby to save on delivery fees.
When people in apartments or residential areas order food delivery like fried chicken, they look for people who want to order together and from one restaurant, so they only pay the delivery fee once.
One of the reasons behind the rising fees is the competition between the different food delivery apps, all rushing to provide faster delivery services. A latecomer into the market, Coupang Eats by e-commerce giant Coupang, began to offer a service whereby riders carry out just one order at a time rather than multiple orders together. This cuts delivery times right down. After it enjoyed a surge in popularity, other existing players launched similar services, pushing up delivery fees as more riders were needed.
Because riders get more fees for single-order trips, more delivery riders are transferring to apps that offer those services. The company that uses multiple orders per trip are hiking fees to pay more to the riders in order to avoid losing them.
Amid the increasing demand in delivery services due to the surge in COVID-19 case numbers, the government plans to investigate the cost of food delivery services starting this month. Ji-young, Arirang News.
Welcome to Dialogue This Week. In this corner, we invite guests from in and out of Korea to talk about a wide variety of issues ranging from culture and sports to the latest trends around the world. The 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics officially kicks off today with its opening ceremony. Nearly 3,000 athletes from at least 91 countries across the globe will gather to participate in the 17-day-long golden race. A total of 109 gold medals will be up for grabs. Now, usually this event is a very festive one where much attention is garnered from the public regardless of age or race. But due to the worsening COVID-19 pandemic situation worldwide, it seems like the enthusiasm and attention is quite low this year. Today, we talk about the psychological, social, industrial impact of the pandemic in the sports industry and discuss what sports post-pandemic could look like. For more on this, we are joined by Chung Yong-chul, Director of Sports Coaching at graduate program at Seogang University via Skype. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
Now, Professor, as I've mentioned, the Beijing Winter Olympics officially kicks off today, and athletes there have been subject to strict quarantine restrictions, and they will be enclosed in what's being called a closed-loop management system during the entire event, which means their freedom will be restricted and they're allowed zero contact with the world outside. So, Professor, how could the current conditions impact the athletes' performances?
Yes, indeed. The general policy, contact policy, could impact the performance at the Olympic Games. The impact can be positive or negative. Usually we think it's a negative, but sometimes a positive. Let me explain both. Being a part of Olympic Games have been a dream come true for a lot of athletes. This is like once in a lifetime experience for those athletes. With a strict restriction in interacting with other Olympians, they would feel less excitement, and for some athletes, some disappointment even. They might not get high level of quality experience during the games. But this sounds awful, but it could be positive performance-wise. Going to the Olympic Games like going to the Disney World as a child. You are so excited to be there, but you are up to the most important event in your athletic life. It has been a great challenge for a lot of Olympians to maintain their composure during the games. In fact, they try hard not to be too excited in order to perform the level they already achieved. The pandemic restriction forced them to stay calm with less distraction overall, less distraction to worry about, better chance to perform well.
So, Professor Chung, what about athletes? Are the athletes impacted differently from performing live in a full stadium versus an empty stadium bearing recorded cheering sounds?
Well, there's quite different between those situations. During the pandemic, however, many athletes already experienced a situation like performing at the empty stadium. They might feel awkward in the beginning, but once they get started their competition, most athletes can handle those kind of situations pretty well. Having full crowd could be a great thing, but at Olympic level, they should be able to handle and deliver what they're supposed to deliver at the games. Most athletes knows how to concentrate in this situation and should prepare for it beforehand.
Now, the Beijing Olympics is the first international sports event to take place as scheduled since COVID-19 pandemic started to grip the world 2 years ago. And even the most recent Tokyo Olympics risked being canceled before it was held last year after being postponed for a year. So if we can look at the last 2 years in sports as organizers set out to take part in stopping the spread of a global pandemic, it seems like the whole connection of industries from sport sponsorships to broadcasting media have been impacted. And on an individual level, elite athletes have not been exempt from having their lives turned upside down by COVID-19. Well, not only changes to their training routine, but all kinds of contact with teammates became restricted, and cancellations of competitions also mean financial instability. So, Professor, how do you see this to have affected the motivation and mental health of athletes?
Greatly. I've seen many professional athletes devastated due to the changes during the pandemic era crisis. For example, I've been following the ice hockey team, and ice hockey league in this region called Asian League has been canceled for 2 years. And last year, there's one professional hockey team disbanded their team. So the players have to be on the street. This is a very devastating experience for a lot of players. Maintaining motivation and the mental health could be extremely important during these days. I recommend players to focus on what they can do instead of dwelling in the past. I ask them to stick to their new routine and appreciate small victories in daily lives. Athletes are pretty resilient during the pandemic, by the way. They often find something positive during the downtimes and to be able to stay normal.
Now, Professor Chung, well, ideally, they have like two categories of sports. There's team sports and individual sports. So I want to ask, like, how is the psychological impact different for athletes for team sports and individual sports?
Team sports are like, you have another body to play, and individual sport, you have to be on your own. Usually, when you are doing your stuff by yourself, you tend to get focused a little better. You don't really get an effect from other people. So in this cases, in pandemic crisis, individual sport are a little better to perform. But once the game started, your teammate can affect you in a positive way or in the negative way. But usually in the professional level, they go hand in hand and work together to tackle this problem. So I see in the beginning the individual sport is much better, but in the end, as a result, the team sport can do better job as well.
But what about for young athletes, Professor? I think they might have a different stance. The pandemic would have a very big impact on their lives as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, for young players, they have to develop their physically and mentally. They do need to do some kind of physical activity, not in a professional way, but in a regular basis. But with pandemic crisis, a lot of people stay inside and do not have enough exercise or activities in their daily lives. So it's crucial for youngsters to play and get a certain amount of time during the day to develop as a player.
Now, Professor Chung, will people gather at sporting events for various reasons, and one of which is the sense of unity and passion. As a director of sport coaching, what impact do prolonged restrictions on gatherings and cheering have on fans?
Well, you see, the sport has been existed and survived for a long time. I mean, from the ancient Greek to the present days. The pandemic changed many aspects of the sport and modern sport. We might not going back to where we were before, honestly. But at the same time, sport can bring back us to what we see as a normal in an abnormal world. Watching and playing sport can be a last resort to many people to at least remember what was like to be normal in the past. I think watching the Olympic Games every 4 years and watching them trying their best and excelling, that kind of give it could be the best remedy for this pandemic generation.
And Professor, the year 2022 is a year full of international sporting events, from the Beijing Winter Olympics kicking off today to the Asian Games and the World Cup. So with continued efforts from organizers to make the events happen as scheduled, what does the recovery of sports look like to you?
As long as the same intensity of the pandemic crisis going on, I don't think there's much difference outside of the sport. But inside of sport, there has been a great changes overall. I think the people have benefit more than before. I think the people to realize the sport can be an actual vehicle to maintain their ordinary lives. So I think what we can do under the circumstances, we should just keep trying and going to portray the sport as a normal day-to-day practices. And someday when the pandemic get over, we should be able to smile at the end.
So, Professor, before we let you go, do you have any message for our athletes, before for the Olympics? Any message of cheering?
Well, the Olympians, I know this is your, most important time of your life. You've been trained and practiced for this moment for many, many years. This is time to shine. I hope everyone at the Olympic Games, going back to the basics and where you were and perform the level they used to play. I mean, I think this could be, even though this is unfortunate, there's a lot of mishaps and unexpected happenings, but your presence and your performance will give us some type of hope for the global pandemic era.
All right, I'm afraid we will have to wrap up at this point. Thank you so much for making time for us, Professor Chung. Let's hope the Olympic Games goes flawlessly with no massive infections. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, another Korean hit series has really been making waves on Netflix. All of Us Are Dead debuted last week and went straight to #1 on the streaming service in 58 different countries, including Canada, France, and Japan. The 12-episode zombie thriller is based on a Korean webtoon in which students at a high school attempt to survive as a virus starts turning the vast majority of them into zombies. During some comparisons to the success of Squid Game, it's been getting mostly positive reviews from overseas critics, The Guardian calling it a world-beating piece of doom. Fans of classical music in South Korea now have the chance to discover what goes on behind the curtain. A concert hall here in Seoul is running special tours to give fans the opportunity to see everything that takes place backstage. Our cultural correspondent Kim Bo-kyung with this report.
The backstage of concert venues is usually off limits for the audience. But now, classical music lovers have a chance to see what it looks like. A concert hall in Songpagu district that specializes in classical music is giving people the chance to take a peek backstage. The tour starts from the hallway where posters of previous concerts are hanging, then goes to the performance hall.
This is a concert hall for classical music without a speaker system. Musicians and singers do not use microphones or speakers, so we use some architectural techniques to fill the hall with sound.
It uses the box-in-box technique of having a stage inside 2 sets of walls to cut out any noise or vibrations, while making the walls irregular and bumpy so that they can bounce the sound back to the stage. The tour participants could go up on the stage and look out at how the seating rises up like the sloping terraces of a vineyard.
This is the first time seeing such a vineyard-style stage. I wondered how long the reverberation time would be, whether those far away from the stage could hear well, but there was no problem.
There are detailed explanations of the instruments, including the finest pianos and pipe organs.
If we send the signal from here, the pipe organ injects the wind and the sound comes out.
Coming out from the stage, the tour visits the instrument storage rooms where the temperature and humidity need to be constant. Next on the tour are the rehearsal rooms and dressing rooms.
Ever wondered how your favorite pianist or classical singer gets ready for their performance? This room is where they put on their outfit and makeup before heading out to perform.
The mirror light has the same level of illumination as the stage, and a small piano is ready for performers to practice on. The participants say the tour is a great opportunity to learn more about classical concerts.
I have visited this concert hall several times with the kids to see the performances, and it is great to see instruments up close and get to know how the performers get ready behind the stage.
The tour will run at least once a month for those who have booked in advance. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Now it's time in the New Day at Arirang part of the show where we take a look at what's going on in the world now. And for that, as always, joining us from our newsroom is Isung Jae. Good Friday morning to you.
Good morning to you guys as well.
Now let's get some updates on the ongoing tension on Russia-Ukraine border. It looks like we're seeing more movement from the Russian military.
That's right. What we saw on Wednesday were 4 Russian military aircraft approaching the UK with Britain's Royal Air Force, noting that 4 Russian strategic bombers were indeed intercepted and then escorted before entering the UK airspace. And then on Thursday, tank and motorized units of the Russian Southern Military District, located very close to the Ukrainian border, held drills, further raising tensions in the region. Now, reports are saying that soldiers are practicing driving vehicles at high speed over rough terrain and choosing positions for well-aimed fire. But Russia has also moved an undisclosed number of troops and military hardware to Belarus, which, by the way, also borders Ukraine. Now, this is likely, though, due to the upcoming joint military drills slated for February 10th to the 20th, as Russia did say that they will withdraw them afterwards. Now, of course, right now, all of Moscow's military moves are being closely watched by the West, as the buildup of Russian troops near the Ukrainian border has sparked concerns over an invasion, which, of course, Russia has denied is the case. Now, Israel and Bahrain on Thursday signed a landmark security cooperation agreement, the very first between Israel and a Gulf nation. According to the Israeli Defense Ministry, the framework of the agreement will support any future cooperation in the areas of intelligence, military-to-military, industrial collaboration, and more. Now, Israel's Defense Minister Benny Gantz and his Bahraini counterpart Abdullah bin Hassan Al Nuaimi signed the deal, and this, of course, comes as Bahrain, along with the UAE, normalized relations with Israel in 2020 under the U.S.-brokered Abraham Accords over shared concerns over Iran. Now, Sergio Mattarella was sworn in for a second term as Italy's president on Thursday, as he urged Italians to pull together to support the country's recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond.
We still need to work together to strengthen Italy beyond current difficulties, a fairer, more modern Italy, intensely linked to the friendly people around us.
Now, the Italian president said he could not avoid the responsibility of accepting a second term due to the COVID-19 crisis and Italy's difficult economic and social conditions. Now, in Italy's political system, the president is a powerful figure who gets to appoint prime ministers and is often called on to resolve political crises. And finally, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson saw two more key advisors resign, as his Chief of Staff Dan Rosenfield, as well as his principal private secretary Martin Reynolds, stepped down from their positions. Now, the resignations also follow those of Director of Communications Jack Doyle and Head of Policy Munira Mirza. Now, three of the officials were directly linked to the Downing Street gatherings, which, of course, sparked the uproar over Johnson's premiership.
Good morning. It's Ipchun today, the first seasonal term of New Year and the beginning of spring. But the big freeze continues to grip most of Korea. It's going to be colder than yesterday, with even afternoon highs below freezing here in the capital. And the deep freeze will continue into the weekend. What's more, there's snow on the forecast, first through the morning. The west coast of Chungcheong, Namdo, and Jeollabuk-do provinces will receive light snowfall this morning, so please drive with extra care. Then, wet clouds will be reformed tonight, dropping snow in Chungcheongdo, Jeollado, and Jeju through Saturday morning. Mountainous regions on Jeju will see more than 10 centimeters of snowfall, 7 centimeters on Jeollado provinces. And along with freezing temperatures, roads will be very snowy and slick. Central inner regions are having lows below minus 10 degrees Celsius again, with cold alerts issued. Even Busan are having a low of minus 2 degrees Celsius. Then afternoon highs in Seoul will be at minus 2. Gwangju and Gyeongju will be at 5 degrees under mostly sunny skies in most areas today. With that, here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that's all we have for now. Mark and I will be back at 8 a.m. Korea time on Monday. I'm Kim Mo-gan.
And I'm Arirang. Have a great day, a wonderful weekend, and thank you as always for tuning in. Until next week, goodbye.